This week on Jerusalem Dateline, terrorists in Turkey. A look at the rise of Islamic extremists in the country and what it means for the security of the Jewish state. Plus, the horrors of honor cultures, a summer fighting to end the systematic abuse of women. And cold winds have been blowing since the so-called Arab Spring, and acts of jihad on U.S. soil are increasing. See how the Arab winter has come to America. Welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, coming to you this week from our Jerusalem studio. Since the 1920s, the Muslim nation of Turkey has aimed to be a secular state by keeping Islamic extremism under control. But in recent years, it's been moving in a very different direction. Now the Islamic government there is not only cracking down on dissent, it's even embracing terrorists. And that has dangerous implications for Israel. Eric Steckelbeck has that story.
Journalists thrown in jail, Twitter and YouTube shut down, political opponents threatened with prosecution. It's the kind of repression usually found in places like Iran and Syria. Only it's happening in a NATO country with aspirations of joining the European Union.
Under the leadership of Prime Minister Recep Erdogan and his AKP party, Turkey has made clear it is setting a new course, one that could put it on a collision course with the West.
Well, I mean, you have to remember that the AKP, the Justice and Development Party in Turkey, is a spin-off of the Muslim Brotherhood. This is an organization that is founded in Islamist principles.
Jonathan Shanzer is with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. He calls Erdogan's path a downward spiral.
Mr. Erdogan sees himself as an Islamist and a Turk, first and foremost. And so he's synthesizing Turkish nationalism with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Shanzer recently wrote an extensive report outlining Turkey's role in financing terrorism. A key component, the Erdogan government's relationship with Hamas. Although designated a terror organization by the United States, Hamas leaders regularly meet with Erdogan. Shanzer says that includes top Hamas operative Saleh al-Aruri, who enjoys safe haven in Turkey.
He's a military operative, and he's based in Ankara, and he's met with Erdogan, he's met with Meshal, and he continues apparently to be involved in fundraising and logistics on the part of Hamas.
Erdogan's support of Hamas, a group committed to Israel's destruction, aligns with his own fiery anti-Israel stance. He's called Israeli President Shimon Peres a murderer, and in 2010 allowed a flotilla of ships to sail from Turkey in an attempt to break an Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip. Violence broke out when terrorists aboard one of those ships attacked Israeli soldiers. Since that incident, relations between Turkey and Israel have been severely strained, with Erdogan even vowing to visit Gaza to meet with Hamas leaders. And Hamas isn't the only questionable friend of Erdogan's Turkey. According to Shanzer, al-Qaeda financier Yassin al-Qadi, a U.S.-designated global terrorist, has visited the country frequently.
We're seeing reports that that he has been meeting with senior Turkish businessmen, Turkish officials, that he's been traveling in and out of Turkey without a visa, without a passport.
Turkey has also become a key support hub and transit point for global jihadists traveling to neighboring Syria to battle the Assad regime.
There are now multiple cities along the southeastern border of Turkey that appear to be safe havens for various jihadi groups. We understand that there are Gulf financiers who are operating there in hotels, dispersing cash to some of these jihadis as they travel through.
These activities have caught the attention of U.S. officials.
We have seen multiple visits by Undersecretary Cohen of the Treasury to Turkey. You don't visit Turkey if you're the Undersecretary of Treasury for Terrorism Finance unless there's a problem.
President Obama has enjoyed a close relationship with Erdogan. Yet the Turkish Prime Minister's radical turn has led bipartisan members of Congress and foreign policy experts to demand the White House hold Erdogan accountable for his anti-democratic actions. More journalists are in jail in Turkey than in any other country, and Erdogan violently put down anti-government protests in Istanbul last year. He also recently shut down YouTube and Twitter after political opponents posted a series of recordings claiming to expose Erdogan's corruption. Such measures are unheard of in any other NATO member country today.
We've got early radar systems, early warning radar systems in Turkey. We've got Patriot missile batteries. We've got massive air bases. We've got investments. And look, more broadly, the Turks have served as an important ally for us. If we lose that, I think it would be really detrimental to U.S. foreign policy.
Although Erdogan denies any wrongdoing, corruption charges continue to swirl around his government. Among the alleged misdeeds is a multi-billion-dollar gas for gold scheme in which Turkey helped Iran evade sanctions over its nuclear program. Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News, Washington.
Throughout the Middle East and other traditional cultures exists a concept known as family honor. It especially affects women who can be beaten or even killed for shaming their families. Now a new film is raising awareness about the horrors these women suffer and what could be done to help them. Marner Diaries, a new documentary, chronicles the systematic abuse and subjugation of hundreds of millions of women in Islamic and other honor-based societies around the world.
The honor system that exists in many cultural societies is really the basis of a lot of harm that is perpetuated against women.
Tweeting, Facebooking, those things can be deemed dishonorable.
Anything from wearing short sleeves, refusing to wear a headscarf, being seen talking to a man, and in some of the most horrifying cases, having been sexually assaulted.
The film brings together 9 women's rights activists and experts, most of them devout Muslims, to tell their stories and stories of the women they work with.
There's a terrible fear of the educated, empowered woman.
They talk about public lashing because of immodest dress, acid attacks, mutilation, forced marriages of little girls as young as 8 or 5 years old, widespread female genital mutilation, and even murder by family members, all carried out under the guise of preserving family honor.
Honor Diaries is not only a movie documentary, it is the initiation of a movement.
At the film's Jerusalem premiere, CBN News spoke with one of the film's experts, Dr. Kanta Ahmed.
Honor violence affects women of all backgrounds, women of all faiths. In many societies, unfortunately, some of the most egregious manifestations are in the Muslim majority world, and these are women who can't speak for themselves.
It's a phenomenon that's spreading even in the U.S. But the movie is facing opposition in America. Several college campuses, including the University of Michigan, have canceled the film. The Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, is spearheading the campaign against the movie. This is what one CAIR representative said on Fox News.
We don't have a problem with the content of the film. I understand that there are women who participate in this film who are Muslim women who work on these very serious issues. What I'm personally disgusted by as a Muslim woman, as a feminist, is that someone like the Clarion Project would take this film and use it to promote their own hate-filled agenda.
The Clarion Project produced the movie, but author Robert Spencer says anyone who speaks honestly about Islam is considered an Islamophobe.
Muslims commit 91% of honor killings worldwide, and there is no penalty in Islamic law for a parent who kills a child. And so anybody who speaks honestly about this kind of thing is targeted by Islamic supremacist groups in the U.S., demonized, vilified, marginalized, accused of hatred, bigotry, and so on.
One of the film's producers, Paula Queskin, says people need to wake up and realize they can make a difference.
There's this paralyzing political correctness that makes us think that we can't challenge things if we don't know about it, but human rights are never something to be ignored. They're never something to be excused by culture or religion.
The controversy may actually draw more people to see Honor Diaries and focus attention on what many Muslim women say is an enormous human rights tragedy that needs to be exposed. You can learn more about the movie Honor Diaries at our Jerusalem Dateline page at cbnnews.com. Coming up, imprisoned pastor Saeed Abedini issues an Easter message from an Iranian hospital bed. That story and more in our weekly news wrap-up.
Millions of Americans with an ostomy live their lives to the fullest every day. And over the last 10 years, thousands have chosen Liberator Medical as their caring and reliable resource for ostomy supplies. Liberator Medical is a nationally accredited Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance provider, so we can handle all your Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance paperwork and billing. And Liberator Medical has been chosen as a preferred supplier by all the leading ostomy manufacturers, including Coloplast, Hollister, Convatec, and Generics. We supply all these leading ostomy brands, so you can always get the ostomy supplies and accessories you want and trust. And all of our ostomy care specialists are product certified by the manufacturers. Shipping is free and discreetly delivered right to your door. Unhappy with your present ostomy supplier? Call Liberator Medical and ask about our free ostomy sampling program. We also offer catheters and urological supplies.
Call 1-800-513-3076. That's 1-800-513-3076.
Pat Boone here with some good news you can trust. Today, our faith, families, and our freedoms are under attack. Polls say 2 out of 3 Americans no longer trust government. A stalled economy, weakening dollar, and politicians willing to steal money from our children to waste on unfixable problems. So, whom can you trust? Well, our money still says in God we trust. But do we? Or have we quietly allowed the things we hold sacred to be stolen by the enemies of traditional values? Today, our government spends almost twice its income, running up a tab for future generations into the hundreds of trillions. How can you stop this from happening to your family? Well, it's all covered in a fantastic new book, The Great Withdrawal by Craig Smith and Dr. Lowell Ponte. Every American needs to read this book. Why don't you call now for a free copy of The Great Withdrawal? It's the simple truth you can trust.
Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. Hello, everyone. I'm George Thomas with this week's news from the Middle East. Israel has left the U.S.-backed peace talks with the Palestinians. Israeli leaders made the move after the Palestinian government's Fatah faction decided to join with Hamas, which the U.S. and Israel call a terrorist group. The announcement shocked Washington and angered Israel.
Hamas Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh announced the end of a 7-year feud with Fatah.
We declare this good news, the end of the years of the division of our Palestinian people in their homeland and in the diaspora. President Abbas will now begin consultations on forming an interim government within 5 weeks.
The announcement marked the possible end of a bitter struggle between the two groups. Hamas overthrew Fatah in a brutal takeover of the Gaza Strip in 2007. Since then, Gaza has been under the grip of Hamas. Many Palestinians welcomed the agreement. While many Palestinians cheered the deal, here in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas had to choose his peace partner, either Israel or Hamas, which the U.S. considers a terrorist organization.
We're trying to relaunch the negotiations with the Palestinians. Every time we get to that point, Abu Mazen stacks on additional conditions which he knows that Israel cannot give. So instead of moving into peace with Israel, he's moving into peace with Hamas. And he has to choose. Does he want peace with Hamas or peace with Israel? You can have one, but not the other.
Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood birthed Hamas. Its charter calls for the destruction of Israel and the formation of an Islamic caliphate or empire in its place. The agreement seriously complicates negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians and creates a dilemma for U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. The State Department called the announcement disappointing and troubling.
It's hard to see how Israel can be expected to negotiate with a government that does not believe in its right to exist.
The State Department said Hamas would need to renounce terrorism, recognize Israel's right to exist, and accept previous Israeli-Palestinian agreements. Kerry hoped the two sides would continue negotiations beyond his April 29 deadline, a deadline now in jeopardy. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
By the way, angry Palestinians are waging a smear campaign against one of their own. It comes after a government minister called Jewish blood precious, according to a Gatstone Institute report. Referring to the shooting death of a Jewish policeman in front of his family, Palestinian Religious Affairs Minister Mahmoud al-Habash said, quote, "We reject all forms of violence, whether they be directed against Israelis or Palestinians. Palestinian blood is like Israeli blood. It is human blood and precious, and no one wants anyone killed." For those remarks, al-Habash's family disowned him, and a militant group demanded an apology. The Jewish policeman, his wife, and 9-year-old son were on their way to a Passover Seder. He was killed. His wife and son were wounded. The Palestinian Authority has not condemned the attack. The U.S. Supreme Court is set to decide if American citizens born in Jerusalem can list Israel as their place of birth. One question is at the heart of the case. Does Jerusalem actually belong to Israel? In 2002, Congress passed a law saying U.S. citizens born in Jerusalem may request their birthplace be listed as Israel on their passports. It was an attempt to nullify State Department instructions that only Jerusalem be listed. The U.S. refuses to recognize any country as having sovereignty over the holy city. The Israeli army is inviting Arab Christians to enlist. Both male and female Jewish Israelis are automatically drafted into the Israel Defense Forces when they complete high school, but minorities are exempt. Christian Arabs have historically viewed themselves as part of the Palestinian Arab people. But recently, a Greek Orthodox priest has encouraged Christian youth to enlist as a way to integrate into society. Arab Israelis make up about 1/5 of Israel's population. Less than 10% of them are Christians. Syria's embattled president is promising to defend the tiny Christian minority from Islamist rebels. He's making the pledge ahead of presidential elections scheduled for June 3rd. Easter Sunday, Bashar al-Assad toured the ancient Christian town of Malula, which has changed hands several times in the past year. Assad is a brutal dictator who's been accused of using chemical weapons against his own people. Still, many in the Christian community either support his regime or remain neutral. They fear a backlash if Islamist groups, including some with ties to al-Qaeda, come to power in Syria. A message of light from a place of darkness. Pastor Saeed Abedini sends an Easter message from his hospital bed in Iran, where he's serving an 8-year sentence for his faith. Part of his message reads, "Sometimes we want to experience the glory and resurrection with Jesus without experiencing death with him. We do not realize that unless we pass through the path of death with Christ, we are not able to experience resurrection with Christ." He signed the message, "Prisoner of darkness in Iran, but free for the kingdom and light." Up next, how the Arab Spring turned into an Islamic winter, and why this man says America is starting to feel the chilly blasts of terrorism.
Attention sleep apnea patients. Are you tired of the expense and hassle of getting your CPAP and BiPAP supplies? Are you fed up with dealing with ill-fitting, leaking, or worn-out masks and straps? Are you worried about the effects that unsanitary tubes, cushions, and filters have on your health? If you said yes to any of these questions, Allied Medical Supply Network has the solution to your problems. You could qualify to have your supplies regularly delivered right to your door at little or no cost to you. That's right, no more inconvenience, no worn-out masks and straps, no more unsanitary equipment, just restful sleep. Call Allied Medical Supply Network today to determine if you may qualify to receive your fresh, brand-name supplies at little or no cost. Don't delay. Call us now to see if you are eligible to save money on regular delivery of your CPAP and BiPAP supplies. Call 1-800-815-9947. That's 1-800-815-9947. Or go to cpapsupplyhelpline.com.
Announcing an important breakthrough in healthcare that can benefit everyone. If you or anyone you love needs affordable health insurance, regardless of a pre-existing medical condition, call Quick Insurance 123 today and get the immediate relief you deserve. Quick Insurance 123 was created to provide affordable health insurance to all uninsured Americans, with or without pre-existing conditions. This is not a discount card. This is a real insurance program that lets you choose from many affordable health plans, with access to doctors, hospitals, emergency services, and more. So call the number on your screen now and get the health coverage you need, just for calling. As a special bonus, we'll send you a free prescription savings card that could save you up to 85% on your prescriptions. That's right, you could save up to 85% on your prescriptions just for calling. Call Quick Insurance 123 to find out how you can get affordable health insurance and receive your free prescription savings card just for calling. Don't wait. Getting a free quote is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Call today.
About 1 year ago, Islamic terrorists launched an attack on America, setting off 2 bombs at the Boston Marathon, killing 3 and injuring more than 250. One expert says that's just the latest attack by Islamic jihadis on American soil.
When the Arab Spring revolutions began in Tunisia and Egypt in 2011, many in the West hailed the uprisings as the beginning of a new era of democracy and pluralism in the Middle East. But that didn't happen. Instead, analysts say the region is less stable, more uncertain, and more violent than before. And the new Arab Spring has ushered in a new and aggressive global resurgence of Islamic jihad. On the anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombing, author and Islam expert Robert Spencer releases his newest book, Arab winter comes to America, the truth about the war we're in. Spencer says the same radical Islamic groups that caused the Arab Spring in the Middle East are at work in America right now, exposing Americans to even more threats of jihad. And he warns that America is shockingly unequipped to face this threat.
Well, joining us now is author and Islamic expert Robert Spencer. Robert, you've written 13 books. What makes this book so different?
Well, you know, in those other books, I covered various aspects of Islamic doctrine, of the terror threat, the aspects of Islam that jihadis use to justify violence and supremacism, the elements of Muhammad's life that are also used to justify violence and supremacism. And in this book, I discuss the denial of all that and the willful ignorance of our government and media elites, such that we are completely unprepared to deal with the terror threat, because at the highest levels there is a refusal to acknowledge that it exists.
You know, we were down there in Tahrir Square in January and February of 2011, right at the beginning of the Arab Spring. How would you define the Arab Spring?
Well, the Arab Spring at the beginning, although it was hailed as this wonderful triumph of democracy and pluralism, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt was always behind it. And allied groups were behind it in Tunisia and Libya and so on. And so it was really an Islamic supremacist takeover attempt. They're still going to be trying to accomplish that goal.
Yeah, exactly. How would you talk about the progress or lack of progress that they've made? I know in Egypt, in particular, the Muslim Brotherhood now has been outlawed.
They have been outlawed, but of course they were outlawed up until 2011 and were the most significant political force in Egypt after the Mubarak government was toppled. And so I don't think that we've seen the last or heard the last of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. And of course they have a very significant friend in Barack Obama.
Political correctness, Robert, you talk about that. Why is political correctness so dangerous in terms of Islamic terrorism?
Well, you know, in the book I discuss how I used to train the FBI in understanding the threat, and all counterterrorism training materials were scrubbed of any mention of Islam and jihad. This leaves us incredibly vulnerable to jihad attack. It's an adage as old as warfare, that you cannot defeat an enemy that you cannot understand or will not understand, and that only ensures that there will be more jihad attacks because our law enforcement apparatus is completely unequipped to understand or deal with this threat.
How would you categorize the way Israel treats Islamic terrorism? I don't think they have the same problem of political correctness in America as they do here in Israel.
No, they don't. They're much tougher in Israel and much more realistic in Israel. But unfortunately, because of the close relationship between the United States and Israel, the Obama administration's willful ignorance about this places Israel at risk.
Can you expand on that, Robert? Because a lot of people say there's sort of a mantra, two states living side by side in peace and security. Do you believe that? And what do you think would happen if there was a two-state solution?
Well, sadly, Chris, that's just not possible. I mean, Obama has talked about a contiguous Palestinian state, which either means a bisected Israel or a vastly diminished Israel. The thing is, the establishment of a Palestinian state, as far as the Palestinian jihad groups are concerned, is only a stepping stone to their ultimate goal, which is the total destruction of Israel. So a Palestinian state would not bring peace because they will not grant the one thing that would make peace possible, and that is Israel's right to exist. But they cannot grant it because it's against Islamic doctrine.
Now, that's obvious with Hamas. Would you also say, Robert, that that's true for the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas?
Yes, there's no doubt about it, Chris. You can just look at Palestinian Authority TV and the genocidal, hateful rhetoric against the Jews and against Israel that they routinely broadcast. And remember also that Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, has said our positions are no different from those of Hamas.
What would you say about the city of Jerusalem? How does that play into their theology and their understanding?
Well, they claim Jerusalem, but actually the claim is based on nothing in the Quran. Jerusalem is never mentioned in the Quran. And it's only based on a tradition of doubtful authenticity of Muhammad making a journey from the Temple Mount up into paradise to meet the prophets and ultimately Allah himself. Now, that's just a legend. The Islamic claim to Jerusalem is only a gesture of supremacism to declare their superiority over Judaism and Christianity and should not be countenanced by our politicians, but unfortunately they don't know anything about that.
Well, Robert, I appreciate your insight and analysis, and the book is called Arab Winter Comes to America. And thanks for joining us, Robert.
Thank you.
When we return, celebrating Easter in the city where Jesus was crucified, buried, and rose again. We take you to a sunrise service at the empty tomb.
Do you have an idea for an invention or a new product? Brian and Alice Jagosh, the inventors of the halftime drill driver, did. They invented a power drill attachment that lets you drill, flip, and drive in seconds. Brian and Alice licensed their invention to the company that brought you the Snuggie, and it's now selling in major retailers nationwide. Look for the Invent Help Caveman on the package. If you have an invention that you would like to try to patent and submit to companies for possible review and want free information on how Invent Help may be able to assist you, call now. Invent Help is America's largest inventor service company with sales offices in more than 60 cities nationwide. Call Invent Help today for free information. Our clients made a financial gain with their invention, but this is just their individual result. Brian and Alice's experience is not typical, as only a very small number of inventions are licensed or sold in stores.
For your free inventors information, call 1-800-559-8567. That's 1-800-559-8567.
If you had a choice between going bald and a full head of hair, which would you choose? Advances in medical science have resulted in the world's first and only permanent solution to hair loss.
Yes!
You wash it, you cut it. It's your own real, naturally growing hair. When it comes to hair restoration, no one in the world has more experience than Bosley. The results look completely natural and are affordable on nearly any budget. But the entire process can't be explained in 60 brief seconds. So to find out more about this clinically proven and permanent solution to hair loss, call now to receive your free no-obligation information kit. It'll answer all of your questions about hair loss and hair restoration. Plus, we'll also send you this $250 gift certificate just for calling. Every day you wait, you're losing more hair. So don't put it off any longer. You owe it to yourself to find out the facts. Choose hair. Choose Bosley.
Call 800-868-9957. That's 800-868-9957.
Finally this week, the world's more than 2 billion Christians celebrated the resurrection of Jesus Christ last week. Pilgrims from all over the world visited the Garden Tomb here in Jerusalem for the annual sunrise service. Some people believe the garden is where Jesus was buried and rose again from the grave. Rico Tice from All Souls Church in London delivered the message and challenged believers with the central question following that first Easter.
But now these three words, "He has risen," change everything. They are the words upon which the Christian church is built. They brought the Christian church into existence. They transformed this sad and despairing group of disciples into men whose flaming courage and radiant joy changed history. And my question, therefore, is this: is your life on this foundation, the resurrection of Jesus Christ? Because that is what means I put my arms around loved ones again. That is what means I see Jesus Christ. That is what means I'm forgiven. That is what means I get a new resurrection body. That is what means that Jesus is alive. Is your faith here? Because this is the only sure foundation in the world.
CBN live streamed the sunrise service. If you'd like to see this year's sunrise service, you can search for it on cbn.com. Well, that's it for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time right here in Jerusalem.